Joining you today for the National Coming Out Day panel. And Nicole, Julia, your fearless leaders of the Canadian chapter, asked me to just share a few words to open this important panel up. So the Betty's Family mission is to champion a diverse, inclusive culture of belonging that engages, empowers, and develops LGBTQ plus employees to drive impact and fully contribute to General Mills. Because really, if you aren't comfortable being out at work and being your authentic self, you aren't able to fully contribute. The Human Rights Campaign reports that 50% of our workforce is still in the closet, which makes Betty's Family mission so critical. If just one more person is comfortable coming out because of what we're doing, I consider it a success. And at the heart of everything that we do, we really want to be a family. Betty's Family was established in the mid-1990s when General Mills created diversity and inclusion networks. Among some of the notable accomplishments have been celebrating Pride. We host a famous Pride reception at headquarters every year for the past 10 years. We've also participated in the Twin Cities Pride parades and in many around the United States and the world for the past 10 years. In 2012, General Mills became the largest company to publicly oppose a constitutional amendment to ban marriage equality in its home state of Minnesota. Our public opposition was widely viewed as a significant moment in the campaign. General Mills has also testified not once but twice on behalf of the protection of LGBTQ plus rights before the U.S. Congress. And 3 years later, General Mills has publicly supported the 2015 U.S. Supreme Court decision that ruled the fundamental right to marry for all. And really, this was on behalf of Betty's Family advocating for our employees internally. In 2019, Family partnered with the Veterans Network for a Pride flag ceremony at General Mills World Headquarters. This celebration marked a historic moment. We were one of the first companies in the state of Minnesota to proudly fly a rainbow flag on the grounds of our corporate operations, and we continue that this year with the socially distant Pride Ride car parade to see the Progress Pride flag flying. That's a mouthful. Today, Betty's Family and General Mills continues to champion, celebrate, and advocate for the community within our walls and our neighborhoods. And programming like National Coming Out Day is just so important to sharing the message of creating a safe and inclusive workplace for all. I was lucky to share my coming out story at one of our panels a few years ago, and it was one of the scarier moments in my career, but honestly, one of the best things I've ever done. I just want you all to know like how vulnerable this panel is in sharing their stories. I like to say that typically coming out stories happen with really good friends over a drink at a bar, not necessarily a Teams call with hundreds of colleagues. So I really just want to thank the panel and Julia, our fearless moderator, for sharing their coming out stories with you today. It takes a lot of courage. So thank you all for being here and supporting Betty's Family. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Julia.
Thank you so much, Kaylee. Well, I just want to say thanks to Kaylee because when Nicole and I were chatting about making Canadian Betty's Family a reality, she was one of the first people that we were able to reach out to and supported us fully. So we really wouldn't have this and where we are today without her. So thank you, Kaylee. And with that, I think it's important to go over, what the history of National Coming Out Day really is. National Coming Out Day has been celebrated officially for over 3 decades every October 11th by the LGBTQ plus community and allies. It's a day that represents a positive celebration for the community where they can celebrate the privilege and freedom of living their authentic lives while advocating for a safer world for those who cannot come out. It started in 1987, where over 500,000 people marched in Washington for LGBTQ plus rights. Since that march, there's been so many groundbreaking progress on LGBTQ plus rights. But despite all of that, many people still do not have the privilege of being out. In Canada, only 40% of lesbian, gay, and bisexual individuals 40% of lesbian, gay, and bisexual individuals face harassment for being out in the workplace, and over half of Canadians are not out in the workplace. Even in Canada, 20% of transgender people still experience physical acts of violence against them. And around the world, it's even worse. 13 countries still have the death penalty for same-sex relationships, while 72 countries still have it as illegal. And only 22 countries around the world allow for same-sex, which really backs the question of why this day is so important. Being able to be out and live your authentic life is a privilege. It allows you to have a much better quality life, which for those who are out, it's proven that they have less anxiety, depression as a whole, which is very important since mental health is disproportionately impacting the LGBTQ plus community, as per the reasons mentioned above. And for every person that is out and proud about their sexual orientation or gender identity, there are countless others who are afraid to share that information. When people know somebody who's LGBTQ plus, they're far more likely to support equality under the law, which is why we've been able to have these amazing and groundbreaking progress and been allowed, and Kaylee been able to put forward a lot of this movement in the US over some progress towards laws. And beyond that, our stories can be really powerful to each other. So without further ado, I will share mine and introduce the rest of the panel. We'll be sharing yours, which will be JP, Sammy, Nicole, and Carla. So as about my sexual identity, which is lesbian, meaning I'm a girl who's attracted to girls. I'm usually seen as really outgoing, bubbly, positive, and confident in my identity, but I wasn't always like this. In second year, I began to realize that I liked girls. Everyone in my life was completely shocked because I had dated boys and had a lot of posters of Justin Bieber and Zac Efron hanging in my room, as many girls do from their J14 magazines. And I tried to look back in my life to see how I could go from liking boys one minute to being interested in girls next. And slowly but surely, many memories of crushes I had on girls and thoughts of liking girls flooded through my mind. But I started to wonder, why were all of those blocked? And I started to think, well, every time that I thought, wow, that girl is pretty, all I kept thinking or hearing from my family or the media and memories coming back of, wow, that's so gay, or girls liking girls is so gross. And because of all of that hatred heard around me, I started to have that hatred towards myself. And I started realizing that it was going to take a while for me to overcome all of this internalized homophobia and at least allow myself to think that I like girls and that's different, but that's okay. And when I finally began coming out to my family, the main message that I received was that I was loved and I was supported, but it was more of a private thing. It wasn't something to be spoken about publicly. And for everyone who's on the call right now, take a second to imagine every single time somebody says, hey, how was your weekend? Which is obviously the phrase of the week that we say at work, of course. And most people say, oh, me and my boyfriend did this, or me and my wife with our kids did that. And for my family and a lot of people, that wasn't something that I should have been able to share, which would have probably just meant I was going to be speaking in puns for the rest of my life. But finally, I realized that I wanted to be true to myself. And so in true Julia fashion, I came out by taking a picture with a rainbow flag and, of course, captioned it with a pun. And after that, slowly but surely, I started taking my identity of a difference being weakness to my difference being a strength. Even in my interview with General Mills, Sammy, ironically, was my interviewer, and he had asked why I failed a class on my transcript. And in that moment, I had two options, which many people who are coming out have. They can either lie and cover their identity, which causes a lot of mental anguish, or I could come out to somebody that I didn't think would be accepting, potentially wouldn't be a workplace where I could come out, and I could have lost that job opportunity. And I ended up opening up about that year that I had failed the class. I was coming out, going through my mental health journey, and it was a difficult time, but I ended up taking that experience and learning from it, retaking the class, joining business clubs that advocate for diversity and inclusion, and running conferences for LGBT plus undergrads in North America, which luckily Sammy did see as a sign of resilience. And as we all know, I am here at this moment. And even with all of the acceptance I received being out at General Mills, there's still many instances where I find myself surprised about how small I feel. There are still many coworkers that ask if I have a boyfriend, and knowing how open I am, it may be shocking to some to realize that I don't always come out at those times. I can't explain why, but the feeling you get from remembering that you're outside many people's norms still makes a lot of people who feel confident feel small. Just a few months ago, my step uncle was saying how his son was going to have lots of pretty girlfriends. In that moment, I knew that the reason I had not accepted my own identity in sexuality was because in my family, it was never spoken about. It was only spoken about the fact that I was going to have lots of boyfriends and lots of crushes on boys. So in that moment, I wanted to stand up for my little cousin and make sure that he would be loved no matter what. So I said, or he could have boyfriends too. And I felt really proud of myself for being an advocate for my little cousin until my step uncle said, God, I hope not. Imagine you were a little kid and your dad said, I hope you aren't gay, and you were. That's the reason why I share my coming out story, to ensure that I can be a role model I wish I had when I was coming out and create a better future and environment for all those around me, for all the kids who do not have accepting families, all the employees who don't know that they can be successful and be out in the workplace, and all the people who are of being out. And I believe truly that when you are able to be your full self, you're able to be your best self, which is why I share my story. So thank you for listening. And without further ado, I will pass it off to Nicole, who will share her story.
All right, thanks, Julia. So I will start off by saying that I have been out for the past 7 years, and I mark being out by the time that I came out to my family. And I have known that I was gay for the past 13 years. So I first realized that I was gay the summer before I went off to university. And this was an extremely tricky time, moving away from home, having to meet new friends. On top of that, I had to come to terms with my sexuality and finding out who I was. I remember making a promise to myself that I would out. I thought that this would be a piece of my life that I could hide forever. The stakes would be too high to tell people. I could potentially never have children, never get married, but that was something that I came to accept. There was a time when I was in my first relationship that my mom got suspicious of my relationship and asked me outright if I was gay. I was not ready at the time at all to come out. I had barely come to terms with it myself. And I was extremely angry and defensive, and I denied being gay at the time. Following that relationship, I had dated men, but there was a key piece of the puzzle that was missing, and I felt like I wasn't living my true and authentic self. So fast forward 6 years, I went to the University of Western. I had a new circle of friends. I was in a new city, no connection to Kingston where I had grown up. And I thought that this was a safe space to come out to people. I confided in a friend via text, as some of us millennials might do. And I sat there waiting for her response, knowing that her response could potentially pave the way for everyone else's response. And luckily, she was so supportive and had a positive response. And it was kind of like a domino effect. I just felt like I could then tell another friend and another friend. And I built up confidence through doing that. But I knew that one of the most difficult situations and conversations were yet to come. I knew that telling my family would demand a level of vulnerability that I had never shown before. I was so afraid, since I had grown up being so close with my family, that they could potentially stop loving me, they could kick me out, they could see me differently. And I was the same person, I just happened to be gay. So I decided to come out to my brother first. My brother is super open-minded. He had a close friend at the time that was a lesbian. And I thought that he was the safest one to tell. So we were at Wonderland one day. I had set no backing out. And as the day came to a close, I knew that we only had one ride left. So we were going up the roller coaster. And right before we dropped, I looked at him and said, I have something to tell you. I'm gay. And then we dropped, and it was just a beautiful 2 minutes of having time to think about what I had just shared, knowing that it would change my life forever, as well as giving him the opportunity to digest this information. Some people may not think it's the most ideal way to come out, but it worked for me. And at the bottom, it was extremely emotional, but I feel like I remember him saying that he loves me and my family would love me and they would support me no matter what. And over the following few months, I came out to the rest of my family, all very unique situations. But what they had in common was that everyone was supportive of me. And I recognized that they needed time to mourn the loss of the future that they had envisioned for me, but they also were able at that point to recreate a new future for me. So fast forward, I am now engaged to my fiance, who I met at General Mills 5 years ago. Both of our families could not be happier for us. My mom is my biggest advocate. She is open to others about my sexuality and makes her acceptance well known. And she demonstrates in subtle ways her acceptance, which really I feel so proud of because she sets an example for other parents who may have their kids come out or may have had their kids come out and know that it's okay to have a kid who's gay and they can have all the same things that anyone else can have. So that's my story.
Thank you so much for sharing, Nicole. I honestly, when I first met you, looked up to you so much and the confidence you had being able to find your significant other at work and be able to go through that journey, especially as a new person myself. So thank you very much. And you're getting so much love in the chat. I love looking at it.
Thank you.
And now I will pass it off to JP. One quick note I was about to type in the chat is that we have questions after everyone. If anyone has any specific questions, please feel free to put it in the chat or come off mute when we're going to pause for a moment, and we'll definitely try. So without further ado, I will introduce JP.
Thanks, Julia. First of all, thank you so much to everybody for taking the time today. I think I was just telling the guys right now, this is actually a very kind of like nerve-wracking moment for me because I'm certainly, I feel like, coming out just in general, let alone to, peers that you talk to on such a regular basis. So appreciate everybody taking the time to really listen and just kind of get to know us a little bit more. So I appreciate it. So I'm here to talk about my coming out story as a gay man. It's definitely has been quite a long journey, and I consider myself a little bit of a late bloomer, so to speak. And I'll tell you a little bit about why I think that is and why that shouldn't be the case. It doesn't matter. There is no right time to come out. So for a little bit of context, so I was actually born and grew up in the Middle East. So I was born in Abu Dhabi. My parents are from the Philippines. And so I lived the first 12 years of my life in the Middle East. And so it was, don't get me wrong, it was a fantastic childhood. I really loved our life there before we moved to Canada. But it certainly was a really difficult environment to explore your sexual identity and to come to terms with that. I had known for a very long time. So I think this is one of the main questions that I get is like, how long did you know? I knew from a very young age that there was something different about, the attractions that I had to men versus women. And so it was really hard for me to come to terms with it. So not only was I living in a society where LGBTQ plus rights are virtually non-existent, it's still criminalized over there right now. I think what was challenging as well as, the household and the spaces that I was taking up over there were relatively traditional. I grew up in a Catholic family, very religious and very conservative as well. And so it just wasn't the norm. It just wasn't the norm. I wasn't seeing myself represented anywhere. So I felt that I fully internalized that there was something wrong with me. And so for a very long time, I definitely carried that on my shoulders. And it was really, really hard to come to terms with that for a very long time. So we moved to Canada when I was 12, which is a great story, of course. As we know, Canada is one of the most liberal, open, accepting societies across the globe. And I was certainly fortunate there. But it took me, again, another 13 years. And I think the journey there was really to come to terms with myself and to start to see and talk to people and really explore kind of like this side of me that was now starting to become this more positive thing. So I think Julia talked about this earlier on about how you really need to overcome your internalized homophobia, which really what it was. where all these negative notions I was projecting onto myself, and I felt that, again, something was wrong with me. And so I'll tell you a little bit about my coming out story. There's certainly a lot of different stories. I started off with one of my closest friends when I was about 24. It was on a car ride, pretty uneventful, and I was just like, I'm going to drive you home, and she had no idea. And then I said, by the way, I date men. And she was like, cool, good job. Like, it was completely anticlimactic. So that was like the first time, and that kind of opened up the floodgates. Another story that I'll talk about as well is just this kind of way that I came out. So the way that I see my coming out story is very much very compartmentalized, because I have different spaces. I have my work friends, my school friends, my family, etc. So I started with my friends first. So the people in my friend group and my school group had actually already known for quite a long time. And one of my friends from school, I actually introduced her to one of my family friends, who I consider a cousin, basically, and who I wasn't out to. And so it didn't even cross my mind that topic would come out at all. But what ended up happening was I found out through my school friend, once they got together, that it actually came up. And for a while, it actually freaked me out quite a bit, and I was really concerned. But then I had a chat with my family friend, my cousin, and she was completely open. And she was almost like, why didn't you, what took you so long to kind of just like share this very important part of your life with me? So that actually set a lot of actions in motion, where that gave me a really big boost of confidence to start to come out to my family. And so to be quite honest, like after that point with my cousin, I started to kind of come out to my brother, my sister, and then my other family friends as well. And coming out to my parents was really quite difficult for me to come to and muster up. Again, when I finally did kind of come out to them, it was almost the most anticlimactic kind of situation that I could have ever imagined. I was almost disappointed that this situation didn't blow up, because I was fully ready to move out. I was ready to kind of just be with my friends. And when it came out, I was almost like, you know what, wow, it should have taken me a little bit longer than this. But I count myself fortunate to be surrounded by incredible peers at work, incredible family members, incredible friends, who it has never come up as a negative thing for me, which I think has enabled me to really go a step further and to be more of an advocate and a voice for a lot of. And so I think one of the main reasons why I did want to, and I appreciate Julia inviting me to sit on this panel, is I think when I really think back to what could have been the one or two things that could have helped me come out even earlier, I think it was just visibility, it's just representation. If I knew as a young JP when I was 8 years old that there were lots of guys like me, people in the community who are living incredible, vibrant lives, and who are people that are successful in their own right, excluding and outside of this important part of themselves, I feel like I would have done that. And so I would have come out even earlier. So I feel like that this is something that I want to continue today, not just for the LGBT community as well, but for other marginalized communities that really need that visibility, that representation in every single space of their life. And so, yeah, so that's my story. I could talk at length about this, I feel, but yeah, I really appreciate everybody taking the time to hear the story.
Thank you so much, JP. It was, yes, I was very happy when we had our chat and for you to come on to the panel. I think that your story really resonated with so many people, especially the point about the power of representation, which I think is so perfect. The fact that you are a marketer and now you get to take a lot of these these experiences and really try to advocate for a better future. I think that's really beautiful. Thank you. And now I will pass it off to Sammy.
Hey guys, first of all, kudos to Julia for organizing the panel and I would say almost like creating a wave across the organization on pushing us to be better at inclusivity and diversity. So big shout out to Julia. And I do remember that story very clearly of having you in the interview process, Julia. So happy that you felt comfortable to open up. That was obviously the goal during that interview. So kudos to Julia. So when Julia asked me a couple of days or weeks ago to share, the first thing that came to mind for me was the pre-coming out. That was definitely the most challenging period of my life. It's, if you're back in your shoes of your 15-year-old, 16-year-old self, you're at a time where you're trying to fit in and be as much alike as the people around you and have that sense of belonging. So for me, that was the most difficult because it's like starting that realization of, hey, I'm different and my life is going to be different, and expectations that people have from me are probably not going to happen in the way that they're seeing it. So definitely just the realization of that was the first shock, and probably just the first time in your life that you're truly, truly alone with something so massive to deal with. It's something you can't really talk about quickly to your parents, or you have like no one to talk to. So definitely for me, the first part was, hey, I need to come to terms with it myself before I'm able to speak about it. And so that was really the first step of my process. And one of the first thing that happened was one of my friends invited us to, she had an uncle that was gay, and she invited a group of friends there at her place. Because as I was going through that process, the biggest thing for me was I don't have models around me. Like I didn't know anyone who was gay. I had no one in my family. So there's literally no one that I could speak to. And it sounds really basic, but I couldn't picture my life. I was like, live, what will I do? Like, who are going to be my friends? I just didn't know. And also in pop culture, obviously was not as open as it is now. So like literally no one was out in the pop culture. And if they were like struggling or having like major backlash. So it just reinforced a little bit the fact that it was like a pretty scary experience. So I was like trying to come to terms with it, and I couldn't really relate with anyone. And then that friend ended up inviting us to her uncle's, and I didn't meet him. She just, because we were at her place with a couple of friends, she just started to tell us about him and his life. And she mentioned that he was gay. And it was the first time really that I was in someone's condo and I was like seeing a place and hearing about someone that was close to me in my real life. And I was like, oh, he has a dog, he has friends, he's accomplished, he's got like a great family, great group of friends. And it was the first time where I could actually tell myself, hey, you know what? I think it's going to be okay. It's going to be different, but I'll figure it out that it's going to be okay. So I'm sure that friend has no memory of that story, but for me, it was a big, important moment where, for the first time, I could actually picture my life in a positive kind of positive light. And then a little bit like JP was talking about. After that, it was the process of saying it, and I started really small with the people that I felt were my allies, that had my back, that I felt they would be there no matter what. Like the people that were gonna love me no matter what, because we had known each other for years, or we had gone through so much already. So I started with my sister, and I think, if I remember correctly, I don't think I ever said the word. Actually, we just went for a walk, and it was like a bunch of silence and read between the lines. And at one point, she's like, "It's okay, I know," and I don't think I even said the word. And so yeah, I was just truly, truly blessed to have groups of people around me that were just so supportive and so loving and accepting, that they were even holding my hand a little bit as I was trying to make that jump. Didn't even have to say the words for the first few people. So I started with my sister, then a couple of close friends. Same situation, the words would hardly come out, but they were like holding my hands a little bit as I was going through it, and almost saying it for me and filling in the blanks and really making me feel like it's okay and it doesn't change anything. We're going to love you no matter what. And so, yeah, having that group of siblings and family and friends was so helpful right from the get-go. And then I think for my parents, that was a little bit tougher. I wasn't sure how they were going to react, and I guess for me, I didn't want to disappoint them. And they had for sure they wanted me to be happy. So I didn't want them to think I was going to be struggling in life. I didn't want them to worry about how I was going to be or if I was going to be unhappy. So I just didn't want them to worry. I think that was the biggest thing. And so I waited probably another couple of months after that, and I decided to wait until I met a boyfriend. And so my first boyfriend, I kind of had him over at my house without telling my parents that he was my boyfriend. And then later, a couple of weeks later, I said, "Hey, you've met this guy. He's my boyfriend, and I'm gay." And then they were like, "Oh, you're happy. We feel reassured." So that was just like super helpful, I think, for them to realize that I was not going to be struggling or unhappy. I was going to find someone to love. And so I think that was helpful for them. And for me, I think for my parents, I didn't want to have this dramatic moments of I feel miserable and my life is over or something like that. I wanted to figure things out a little bit by myself before I could speak to my parents. So I think that was like for the coming out portion. And I think the following years for me was just, when you do it, you almost think like, okay, this is done. Now I can just move on with my life. And then it's realizing, oh, it's not this one thing that you do once. It's actually going to stay with you for the rest of your life. And so every single time you're in new social settings, you kind of have to find a way to make it work. So probably like university and starting my career, those first couple of years, it was the realization of, hey, I need to find that balance. I need to find that natural way and confidence in myself for just things to come up naturally. And, for me now, it's coming out naturally in conversations the same way that someone would talk about their kids or their weekend. And I can talk about what I did with my partner over the weekend as well. So it took me a couple of years, I would say, to reach that balance and just realizing that's something that stays with you through the rest of your life. So yeah, for me, I think it's also been something that I kept almost as a filter, a reminder to love yourself first, and then try to be super open with any diversity, whatever they are around ourselves. And so I think, now as a leader, I'm a bit further in my career, I really, really try to set the tone with people around me. And I've had the chance to have JP and Julia on my team, but really making sure that I can also be a model and just setting the tone that it's okay to be different. It's not even something we need to address. It comes out naturally, and everyone is welcome to be their true self.
Thank you so much, Sammy. And I really hope that you don't mind me sharing this, but when I did ask Sammy to come on to the panel, I remember the first thing that he said to me, which hurt me a little bit, like just from sadness, was, I don't think my story is good enough. Like, I don't think it's as painful as people are expecting it to be. And I started thinking about that a lot, which was, why does having to be kicked out of your house and denounced by your family have to be the norm and have to be the average? And there's a really great quote that I'm going to summarize because I don't remember, but it was, why do we have to bring people up to the average? Why can't we bring the average up? Why do we have to have these painful stories in order to be the norm? But why can't we have people who go through sad experiences not have sad experiences and just have a more positive life? So personally, I really appreciated your vulnerability, Sammy, and I think that your story really resonated a lot with me, and it seems that a lot of people it resonated with as well. So I hope it was appreciated. And without further ado, I will welcome, last but not least, Carlos.
Awesome. Thanks, Jules. So I will start by saying, for the ones who don't know me, my name's Carlos. My pronouns are he and him. I am an ally, and I'm here as an ally basically to walk the talk. One of the things that resonated with me the most over the summer when we had the Pride Month and when we had like the Black Lives Matter movement is that it's not enough to just be accepting or just to be tolerant or just to say that you agree. You have to be vocally and actively anti-discrimination, anti-racism with your everyday actions. So I'm here hoping that I can put to practice that which resonated with me so strongly over the summer. I will share actually two stories of very close family members and their coming out stories. So the first one is my aunt and the second one is my sister. And these two individuals could not be more different from one another, and their stories could not be more different. So I'll start with my aunt. So she's someone that is very close to me. We lived together many years. Actually, half of my life I lived on a household with only women. So I lived with my mom, my aunt, my grandmother, and my great-grandmother. So all of them really strong, independent figures for me. And I was probably 10 or 12 years old when I first knew that my aunt was lesbian. So I was even more naive than I am, and that is an important fact because this is actually a hilarious story. We were actually on a housewarming party for my aunt and her lady friend that she had moved in with. So like they're like showing us a place, and then like my aunt got like called to do something, so like she left the room, and so my parents like kind of like both like turn around, look at me, and like my mom says like, okay, so like your aunt just moved in with a woman. And I was like, yeah, I know, like they're like such good friends, like it, like I can tell like they get along like so well, like it's gonna be like so cool for them. And then like I remember we were in my aunt's bedroom, and she was like, no, like you're not getting it, like have you noticed there's just only one bedroom? And I was like, yeah, I guess that's odd, but like I guess I don't know, like the other rooms really look really well, I guess we're like maximizing the space or something. Like I was just not getting the hint. And then my mom's like, no, like your aunt is a lesbian. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess that also makes sense. But by that point, my mom was starting to like stress up quite a bit, and I was like what's wrong? Like, why are you stressed? So I got stressed. So then my mom got like extra stressed again. So it was just like a very like funny moment in which we were like both stressed with like my aunt like she had completely no clue. I don't think even to this day she knows we had that conversation. Um, but you know, like thinking back, you know, about the lessons that my mom and my aunt left me with that day, I guess there's two things. So the first one, in terms of uh, like allies, like if the coming out experience is a good one or a bad one, I would like to think that the responsibility relies fully on the ally. I was already okay with the idea that my aunt is a lesbian. Like I'd known her all my life. And I guess the situation became unnecessarily tense because it was not handled as what it is, which is a completely normal thing, right? Like if my mom had said like they moved in together because they're in love, like that would have been like so much easier than just trying to, you know, minimize or kind of like hide it behind they moved together. Like there's only one bedroom. Um, I would also say that coming out moments are like naturally, you know, awkward, they're tense, but the nature, because it's tense because you are receiving a very intimate piece of information. It's like it's something that the other person treasures a lot, and that person is trusting you. So that's why it's delicate, and that's why I think that it's so important that the responsibility lies within the allies to create that safe and trusting environment that the person is asking for. And then the other thing that I was thinking about my aunt and that she left me um, is that as an LGBTQ plus member, you don't owe a single explanation to anyone. The quality that I love the most about my aunt is that she is absolutely unapologetic. She has never ever felt the need to justify herself. She is who she is. If the world disagrees, that's the world's problem. And that's made her an extremely happy person. I actually applied that lesson in my life. Like, I think that's allowed me to enjoy things that I enjoy. Like, I did ballet for a few years. I like doing my nerdy hobbies, and I'm never thinking, what is X person going to think about me? So I would like to say that the lesson that she gave me is that coming out is sharing. It's definitely not explaining. And the second story is about my sister and her girlfriend, and uh, both of them were on the completely opposite personality spectrum versus my aunt. My sister is someone that I did not live with due to family reasons. She grew up in separate households. We did not see each other for many years. So getting back together and getting to know your sibling again after so many years as teenagers, young adults, is definitely an interesting but very rewarding experience. So I remember it was maybe 7-10 years ago. It was Christmas. There was like a small family dinner. We used to have like several gatherings like during those like 2 or 3 week periods. And then we were on one of those parties, and then she brought me to the side and said like, I have to tell you something, like I'm gay and my girlfriend might be coming over in a couple hours. And I was like, okay, like, thank you for telling me. I love you. Like, whatever you choose, whoever you love, like, I always be here for you, and I love you so much. And that moment, I actually is not the one that stuck out with me the most, but what happened next with her girlfriend. I met her. She was this very shy, very sweet girl, having obstacles trying to start her career, but focus, having aspirations. I met her a couple of times over those weeks, and she eventually confessed to me that she was hesitating whether or not to come on that first dinner until my sister told her how I had reacted about the news of them coming out. So like that happened, like we met a couple more times, and then eventually I remember that she gave me a letter, and in that letter she basically was thanking me, and I remember very clearly she said something around the lines like, thank you for treating me like a person and accepting me as a lesbian. Like no one, like you're one of the first people to treat me that way. And I remember like that shocked me because I never did anything special. Like I greeted her like the same way I would greet any one of you guys. I think like if at all, I was being a little bit like that defensive older brother that's like, okay, like, are you gonna take care of my sister? Like, what are your like, are you just like fooling around? Like, are you serious? Like, I was even more of I felt that I was more on that stance. So that she gave me a very powerful lesson on the power of everyday good actions. I believe that many of us can take good actions for granted because it's cheap coin for us. Like you get it and you give it every day, but there are some people who don't. So you can change that, and you can completely change someone's life by giving them basic kindness and respect. So yeah, those are my two stories. I think they're about, the power of kindness. They're also about, creating a safe space for your LGBTQ plus friends and family, because that's your responsibility as an ally. And for everyone that's on the LGBTQ plus and is afraid of coming out, you please know that you don't owe anyone a single explanation.
Carlos, thank you so much. You did my job for me. I was going to summarize, but you beat me to it. But no, thank you so much for coming on the panel. Honestly, I'm really lucky to have. So Carlos and I call each other work husband and work wife, which is probably the only time I'll have a husband. But I'm very lucky to have him in my life because it is true. Carlos really is the person who says that he's going to show what he means as opposed to say it. And I really loved having him on the panel because he did a very good example of showing what a great ally is. So thank you, Carlos. And so I do have prepared questions, but I would love to pause. There's a lot of amazing stories. Rishma said it best, another amazing story. But if anyone has any questions, I'll pause before I can then go through with any prepared ones that I have in case anyone doesn't want to ask. And you can either put it in the chat or come off mute and ask yourself.
Hey, Julia. I haven't put anything in the chat yet because that's multitasking and I'm too old for that, clearly. But oh my God, what an unbelievable set of experiences. Like I am just so blown away and inspired by every single one of you. More so, I knew I would be because you're all amazing people, but even more so than I would have imagined. I mean, such great stories, so well told, and just such a great opportunity to have a real glimpse into your lives is just so meaningful. So I want to deeply thank you all for sharing. I mean, it takes a lot of courage, although I don't think you guys, courage is interesting because you guys don't seem scared of anything. And I know that you were, and you went through a journey, but you are just so courageous and inspirational to all of us. I mean, I love all your stories, but the roller coaster is one that I am personally going to use when I've got a difficult thing to say to someone.
Good, you should.
Be as dramatic as what you've had to say, but that's genius. It's like, and to shut up and think about that for 2 minutes before saying anything. Genius. Carlos, I really had no idea what you were going to say today. I thought maybe this was a coming out story, but the ballet is pretty interesting, though. I had no idea that you did that. No, I'm happy that you did. I mean, listen, to all of you, before we get into questions, I needed to say something because I've been sitting here wanting to type something, and I'm like, I don't even know what to type. It's just so powerful. Kaylee, thank you for being with us and supporting this team. I know Julia and Nicole have been on this for a while, and you guys are making us so much better. I mean, compared to a couple of years ago, we're moving fast. I know we've got a long way to go still, but we wouldn't be doing this if not for your leadership. So I just want to say thank you. and how much we appreciate you all and what you're doing here.
Thank you very much, Dale. We really, really appreciate that. That's more than wearing any purple or having any background. It was like Carlos walking the walk. No, but thank you very much. We really, really appreciate that. I was, if anyone joined afterwards, Nicole and I were joking that this time last year, it was just 5 of us with a bag of bugles in the middle of a table. And Emma, I think, was wearing her purple shirt. And we were hoping it'd get better after this. And we're really appreciative that everyone's joined us for our own panel. I do have a question from Tiff. And I love all these questions a lot better than the ones I had prepared. And someone asked the question that I had for our ending one. So this is perfect. But Tiff says, a question from an ally. Do any of you wish that a friend or family member would have, quote unquote, opened the door to your coming out? Or did it need to be on your own terms and your own timeline? Which I think is a really, really great question. So I will pause and see if Nicole, JP, or Sammy would love to tackle that one.
Yeah, I can take this one on. So I often get asked by people when I tell them my coming out story, or when I come out, what would have made it easier for you to come out? And I think it's really about just opening the doors, whether it's like to your children or to your sister, to your brother, and making it known how you feel about people coming out, if it's hopefully it's positive. And I mean, no matter how supportive you think your family is, like I did think deep down that they would be supportive, but it doesn't make the experience any less scary. So I think just using opportunities, say when someone else comes out, to share that with the people around you and know that they would be loved and accepted and you wouldn't think differently of anyone would be really meaningful.
I think that was a great answer. Thank you, Nicole. Pause to see if anyone else wants to jump in. Otherwise, I can go to the next one.
Nicole, it's Rishma. I just put it in the chat, but since you opened it up, first, thank you guys so much. That was probably the best hour I'm ever going to have in a long time in terms of being inspired, and just really proud of you guys for speaking up today. So my question would be, do you have any suggestions, or how do you feel about Team Canada and just General Mills Canada being a safe space for employees to bring their authentic selves to work? Do you have any suggestions, or do you have ideas or thoughts on how we could be doing better to sort of create the comfort level that obviously you guys feel that we want everyone to feel?
That's a great question. Thank you, Rishma. And Sammy, I don't want to put you on the spot by any means, but I know you brought this as a potential question for us to ask, and you had some thoughts if you wanted to.
I'm going to put you on
share.
the spot. You are.
My performance review isn't after this, right?
Yeah. No, it's such a great question. I don't know if it's a Team Canada situation more than, I'll answer it more in the ally format a little bit more. But for me, I agree. We've come, years ahead. For those of you that have been working for a little while, it's we've come such a long way. I think in terms of acceptance and diversity. So I think we're in the smaller gestures that can make a big difference, and how to set the right tone. And I think for me, a small one is just don't assume anything if you meet someone for the first time. It's as simple as that. I've had a couple of uncomfortable moments myself, with the head of HR from L'Oreal after working there for 5 years or 6 years, and getting asked if I was going to bring my girlfriend to the Christmas party. And just, it's those small, and then you have to battle, did he say girlfriend? Oops. Like it creates just an uncomfortable moment.
Yeah.
So I think it's in the small gestures and the small way to interact. If you're interacting with someone for the first time, just open up by just asking a question. Hey, are you bringing anyone to the Christmas party? Or what have you done this weekend? Just open it up without assuming anything. That's just a small one that I think most of us on the panel, I'm sure we've had those examples in those situations where you're kind of forced to correct someone, and it's a little bit uncomfortable when it happens.
Yeah, and just to build on that, this is my second kind of like part of my career. And my first job pre-MBA for 3 years, I was not out at all. Like I was living kind of like a double life where I would allude to people that I was dating, but never really being very specific. I even brought my best friend who's a woman to a Christmas party just to kind of like quell some of those conversations. And I think to what Sammy was just saying, I think the reason I think that came about was I almost had to double down on the story that I was looking to tell, because I think there were a lot of instances where people were like, oh, so tell me about the girls that you're dating, and I wasn't ready to come out. And so as a result, I had to basically say, yeah, you know, this is what's happening with me right now. And then you have to draw that thread because you're in too deep and you don't want to make the other person very uncomfortable. And I had to keep that within me. And I think that's helped double down. So I think what Sammy's saying is totally bang on in terms of at work. It's really in the everyday interactions. It's the not assuming, but also, you know, pay me the respect, or just that I am, that my experience is just as valid. That, you know, like, I may not be doing the same things as you and your partner, etc. But I think it's also, I don't want you to shy away from asking me or talking to me about how my weekend went, or like what are the things that I'm interested in relation to my sexual identity, because I think it's a big part of who I am, and I don't want you to shy away from it either, just because let's have that uncomfortable conversation, but let's not start with an assumption.
Good advice. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for the question. And I'll pause again if anyone has any other questions. I have a question.
Sorry,
oh, yeah.
I have a
Oh,
quick
please.
question. Do you think that we need more, because we did have some training, some really good training during Pride Month on just educating ourselves. Do you think we need more of that? You know how we get all kinds of like training on ethics and just something to bring home what Sammy was talking about.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's something that the Betty's family in the US is doing more of, that we could tap into.
Yeah. Just Julia, do you want me to answer this just from
Yes,
allyship training?
My answer was going to be that it's one of Rishma's and Catherine Huff's big initiatives, which is to really spearhead a lot more allyship as a whole at General Mills. So Rishma, please, I would love you.
Yeah, the only thing, that's perfect summary. We announced at the last stretch that we would be focusing a lot more on diversity inclusion in all facets of what that means. We've got some allyship, really great modules that we're going to bring to life a little bit for all of Canada, where we're going to have people sign up, watch the modules, have some really good focus group discussions. And there's an email that Catherine's going to be sending out this week. Sorry, somebody's cutting my lawn. To introduce it. So it's coming. It's sort of a focus for October and November, but absolutely, thank you for asking, Jackie, because it's very important and there's so much available that we just haven't used yet, and we really need to get people educated on some of this stuff.
That's awesome. Thanks.
Thank you, Jackie. Also love your shirt. Very lovely. Okay, Tobias has a question. Any advice on people's tendency to quote unquote name or quote unquote label things? So are you gay? Are you lesbian? Or is there a safety area ... queer? I think I can touch on that a little bit. And I would love to preface that a lot of anyone on the panel or myself even definitely does not speak for everyone. And, you know, even as a community, everyone has their own preferences. I think one of the things about having a lot of labels that Nicole and I went through in one of our little amateur videos is that the nice thing is people can label themselves, which I think is really important. And that, to Sammy's point about not making assumptions, there are lots of people who grew up in many different generations. For example, lots of my mentors who grew up in older generations knew the word queer as a slur. And it brings back a lot of really unpleasant memories where people would say really horrible things in a negative way. Myself, growing up in a much younger generation, people are starting to reclaim a lot of those labels and being able to say, I would love to use this word because I want to reclaim it and make a negative a positive. So it's definitely different amongst different people. But I think one thing that even Sammy touched on too is even coming out isn't a specific binary, even though I identify as someone who is out. There's many, many times where people still ask about if I'm bringing my boyfriend somewhere, and sometimes things are assumed. And so sometimes it's never a binary. Sometimes people might have one label 1 year and another label in another year, because a lot of this is a spectrum. People are constantly developing new identities about themselves. So I think the really important thing is when people label themselves, if they choose to, it's very important, which I actually would love to touch on before we close off. Jackie brings up this a lot, which I really love. And Carlos, as an ally, did a much better job than I did. I forgot to use my pronouns, which is very important. So one of the biggest things about labeling yourselves is that sometimes it's easier to label yourself if you are in a power of strength. For example, my identity is cisgender, meaning that I am born the identity that I identify as. So I use my pronouns, she, her, on all of my email signatures, which would then hopefully allow it to be easier for anyone who is transgender, gender non-binary, to come out if they have identities that may differ from what people may assume. So I think that was a good segue to answer your question, hopefully biased. But thank you to everyone so much for joining the panel. We really, really appreciated it. Thank you, Nicole, for co-leading this with me and all of the efforts of bringing this forward. Sammy, JP, for your sharing your stories. I really appreciate it. And Carlos, I really appreciate having you in my life every day and showing what a really good ally can be. So for meeting effectiveness, because I know Fawad is here as well and Bowder, we will end the meeting now. But if anyone has any other questions, please, you can feel free to message. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Amazing.
Yeah, good job, you guys. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Guys.
Bye.